The Indian horticulture sector has now even surpassed the cereals and food crop sector in terms of production in the country. Uh, we have about 20 million hectares, 20 million odd hectares, producing about 300 million metric tons of horticulture produce. And we also happen to be the global leader in the production of several fruits and vegetables, right from banana to onion to chili, that kind of thing, including lychee, pomegranates, etc. Now, despite this leadership in the production phase, there are several constraints which is not helping us enhance the demand potential, meaning in terms of penetrating global value chains. We hold control of only about 1% of world trade, which is very marginal. Uh, that is a critical constraint. Another major constraint that we face is many farmers, despite the fact that horticulture production could easily facilitate doubling or even tripling of farmer incomes in a couple of harvests, as highlighted by our chief guest today. Also, farmers do not get into horticulture production because the risks involved. So, market connect, risk reduction instruments, including insurance and advisory services, are very critical. Uh, Another major scope for horticulture again is to increase the GNP of the country, the gross national product, in terms of greater export earnings. So both farmer incomes, nutrition security, as well as GNP contribution. These three are critical contribution areas for the horticulture sector. And the constraints are, uh, uh, I would not say huge, they are manageable. If they are targeted in joint action through stewardship councils, working groups, that kind of thing. What are these constraints? Production area, we have constraints with regard to quality inputs. We have constraints with regard to micro irrigation facilities, constraints with regarding to planting material, disease-free planting material, constraints with regarding to the advisory services, extension services in horticulture. This is the production area. In the post-harvest and processing area, we have constraints with regard to infrastructure. We have constraints with regard to resources by the private sector and government sector deployed into post-harvest and processing, critical constraints. In the marketing and logistics area, again, we have several constraints. We have constraints in free trade agreements and bilateral trade agreements not being yet appropriately oriented to the extent required with regard to helping us penetrate the European markets, the American markets, etc., or even the Russian markets. Similarly, we have another constraint on the marketing side in terms of market intelligence. Farmers do not know what to produce and when to produce. So if all farmers get to produce, say, capsicum, as has happened in Punjab, you find prices will collapse. All farmers get to strawberry, prices will collapse, especially when the global market is not yet developed adequately. So market intelligence, market planning and advice by the government and by ecosystem stakeholders, gaps in terms of appropriate orientation of free trade agreements through policy advocacy. It could be in terms of sea protocols. Banana from the Philippines, a small country like the Philippines, which is producing a small share of what India produces. India produces 50% of banana in the world. World trade, we are just a couple of percentage points. But Philippines controls the significant part of world trade in banana through appropriate sea protocols also, when the banana should be harvested so that in the appropriate time it reaches the UAE market or the European markets. So various initiatives that had to be done on the marketing and logistics side also. Government of India has aggressively promoted and introduced several schemes. The Gati Shakti scheme for logistics, the Mega Horticulture Cluster Development Scheme, which GTS PMA is managing in India, a multi-billion dollar scheme. Also several infrastructure schemes again, which our firm happens to be managing in India on behalf of the government and other stakeholders presently. All these need to be addressed, along with appropriate policy initiatives. So production area constraints, post-harvest and processing area constraints, marketing and logistic constraints need to be addressed. And this can all be addressed not by just one stakeholder alone, not by the government alone, not by the farmer alone, not by the private stakeholders involved in input, output, technology, services, etc. They all need to work together. Critical agenda of the event today, the forum today, addition, is to evolve working groups. World Bank jargon-wise and ADB jargon-wise, we refer to them as stewardship councils. Stewardship councils involving all the stakeholders and ensuring implementation of the remedial measures which have been evolved for targeting and redressing each of these constraints. Yeah, so these constraints in the horticulture sector, as I mentioned, these 10 to 15 major constraints, could be easily addressed by appropriate intervention. Crop advisory services, which is a critical gap, could be again addressed as GT is demonstrating with Bayer and other leading players in the input supply and crop protection field, work with the ICAR, with the input and crop protection companies to disseminate crop advisory services, private and public working together. Schemes with regard to micro irrigation, watershed development or management, or with regarding to infrastructure, again could be facilitated through greater private sector investment. It need not be only financial subsidies. It could be just fiscal incentives, could be even government support towards establishing such infrastructure. So various such things could be targeted through joint action.